In 2025, the Commander-in-Chief recalled him from retirement to serve as our nation's most senior military officer. And I will tell you, there is no busier man in uniform today. He oversees some of the most complex military operations in a generation, including Operation Midnight Hammer, and he's leading the Joint Force through consequential days right now. That he made time to be at Carlisle this morning tells you exactly how much he believes in this Commonwealth and this summit and its impact on the defense of our nation. And I will tell you, this is sort of a homecoming for the chairman, as he spent some time here after graduating from the Virginia Military Institute, but I will let him elaborate on that if he chooses. An aviator, a warrior, and America's senior military officer, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming back to Carlisle Barracks, General Dan Kane. Well, can you guys hear me okay? Sounds like it. All right. Well, Trevor, thanks for that great introduction, and thanks to you and your family for all you do to serve. Senator McCormick, I think, is voting, but I appreciate his invite to do this. It is always a privilege for me to come back to Pennsylvania and here to Carlisle. A quick story. After graduating from VMI, my dad was a student up here at this great institution, and I came up here to live. In the early days of my professional life, me with my one-page resume, a pair of khakis, a red power tie, and a blue blazer, believed ideologically that I could solve the global economic crisis right on High Street down here in Carlisle. So if you'll hang with me, imagine young Dan Kane walking to all of the banks with my very average economics degree and sliding my one-page resume slowly across the table to that bank manager, convinced that I could solve their problems. And I could not get hired as a bank teller in Carlisle. About 20 minutes later, my tie's undone. I'm walking dejectedly down High Street, and there's a help wanted sign at a place called Fast Eddie's Billiard Parlor and Saloon. And I walked in, and a gentleman named Dick Phelan took grace upon me. And before I could explain who I was, he said, "You're hired." And I said, "What do you want me to do, sir?" He says, "You're going to be a bartender." And I said, "I don't know how to make any drinks." And he says, "You'll figure it out." So I ended up working at Fast Eddie's. And then ultimately the gingerbread man down here, raise your hand if you're a local and you understand the G-Man. I ran the G-Man earlier in my life, which was my first business and entrepreneur experience, which was great. I want to express again my thanks to Senator McCormick and his team for pulling this together, along with the leadership here at the War College, General Breedenkamp and the team. And let's give everyone who put this incredible event together a round of applause, please. Looking around this room today, I'm humbled and inspired by the convergence of talent, experience, and patriotism gathered in this room. We've got defense CEOs, tech pioneers, capital allocators, investors, military officers. And the way I think about this is the three amigos of America's defense: funders, founders, and fighters. And you got to have all three to drive America's combat capability. The collective brainpower, energy, and experience of all of you in this room represents what I believe to be America's single greatest strategic advantage. And that's each and every one of you. It's a powerful reminder, and we should never forget this, that when we go fight our nation's wars, we never do it alone. It is always with our private sector partners. Your continued innovation, your shared commitment to this mission are not just helpful, my friends, it's essential. And as we look at the tapestry and the landscape, the global environment that we're operating in right now, I couldn't be more grateful for each and every one of you. And this is an important time. It's complex, it's dynamic, and it's consequential for our nation's security and our shared future. The challenges that we face right now are global. They stretch across every domain of warfighting, and they're evolving simultaneously. And they compress the time and space for leaders and risk holders to make decisions. As the chairman, my job is to look across the globe to give the president a set of military options and associated risks, and then help him and the rest of our national command authority to carefully weigh the use of military force, the other elements of government power to include our economy, our energy, our alliances, our partnerships, the intelligence that we get from our intelligence agencies, all to ensure and assure the safety and security of the United States of America. And when I think about global risk today, that global risk equation is extraordinarily complex and scaling. Ongoing operations in the Middle East, more than 4 years of a brutal conflict in Europe between Russia and Ukraine, the interest that we have in securing our southern flank in our own hemisphere, a nuclear-armed North Korea, and a China that continues to advance on their own military and strategic objectives. And all of this is happening at the same time. Layered on top of all of this is the speed now at which information flows. Leaders who stood in our stands before this had time and space to make decisions. They had days and weeks. We're now down to simply seconds, and every second matters. Warfare is no longer confined to traditional domains. It now stretches literally from the seabed to cislunar space and soon beyond. We're fighting and competing in the cognitive space, the fiscal space, the cyberspace, and the information space. And it ranges from feeds on our phones to satellites and everything else, all at the same time. And at the same time, the very character of war is changing, driven by unprecedented complexity and technological acceleration in areas like AI, quantum, autonomy, and drones. And these advances are driving down quickly the cost per effect and pushing lethal and non-lethal capabilities in the hands of a lot more actors than we had to deal with before. And we have to remember right now, as both buyers and sellers, that quantity has a quality all of its own. And today that quantity can be built, networked, and employed much faster than it could before. We see this emerging all over the world right now on today's battlefields. A few years ago, it took nation states to put together sophisticated command and control structures, sensors, networks, etc., precision weapons into the fight. Now small teams are doing that literally day over day. If you walk out to Ukraine and you go to the FLOT, you see innovation happening in real time. The new reality of modern warfare, my friends, is competition at a speed and velocity that we haven't planned for. And the integration of AI represents a whole new world for the U.S. military, but for our nation as a whole, fundamentally transforming how we see, sense, understand, and decide and act in modern competition and potentially conflict. And we've got to harness these technologies right now. And your joint force is entering an era in which real-time data, autonomous systems, human-to-machine teaming is not an option, it's a requirement. And that's why events like this here in Pennsylvania, the partnerships forged tonight between the joint force, entrepreneurs, investors, innovators, and like I said, founders, funders, and fighters is so important. You are critical in this line of effort to ensure that we are prepared if we are called upon. It's you in this room, the people who write the code, build the sensors, design the capabilities, manufacture the capabilities, scale those capabilities, so that we end up making sure that those young members of our all-volunteer force have the combat capability and capacity that they need before I ask them to go do something. What I need you to know, and I know this is simple for me to say, but hard to do, is to go faster. Please go faster. Think bolder. Stay focused on real problems that soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, Guardians, and Coast Guardsmen face every single day. To everyone, and I say this having spent time in the private sector and now back in the military, we all need to deliver quality weapons delivered on time with shorter lead times and at lower costs. Bring us ideas that can survive first contact with the acquisition enemy and scale at the speed of relevance. And work with us to break down the bureaucracy that slows all of us down. And we owe you a few things as well, my friends. We owe you to be better buyers, to write better contracts, to be more predictable in our asks, and we're working on this. But we cannot do this alone. And I appreciate the efforts, the leadership, and the actions the Congress is doing on both sides of the Congress and on both sides of the aisle to help us properly arm America's joint force before we need to go use it. So we got to all keep going. Collectively, we all have to have a deep and shared sense of urgency and a clear-eyed understanding of risk. We must move together with speed and precision to build a joint force and a more innovative joint force. And when I think about innovation, I think about legacy. And as Americans, not Americans, we've done this numerous times, and all of you are great Americans. Right here in Pennsylvania, that tenacity and grit has shown itself time and time again through the history of our nation. And this nation is a country that leans into hard problems, that attacks challenges, that is entrepreneurial at the core of our being, stretching back more than 250 years of our American history. We've spanned this continent with steel rails that became America's railroad systems. We've mapped the bottom of the ocean. We've walked on the moon, and soon we'll walk on Mars. And in the dark days of World War II, we didn't just fight forward. We mobilized this nation. We innovated and we transformed an entire industrial base to meet the needs of those 18-year-old kids out at the front edge of the fight, closing with our enemy. And a lot of it happened right here in Pennsylvania. In Butler, the American Bantam Car Company took an idea and in 49 days created the Jeep, something that still exists today. In Eddystone and Burnham, the Baldwin Locomotive Works made more than 2,400 tanks, along with locomotives and ship propellers that the Army and Navy needed to get to the fight. In the Cold War, we faced a different kind of set of challenges. We outcompeted, out-innovated, outmaneuvered, and outthought our adversaries for more than 40 years and imposed costs that resulted in a much more peaceful world. The entire history of our great nation is built on a simple premise. When we can come together and bring our best ideas and focus together on a common purpose, there is literally nothing we cannot do. And I believe the next Bantam, the next Baldwin, the next breakthrough challenges, the next breakthrough that changes the fundamental tapestry of the way we're going to fight and win our nation's wars is sitting in this room right now. There's an example just down the river on the south side of the river, the New Cumberland DLA facility in Susquehanna. This distribution center sits at the nexus of what we need to do to be able to supply the joint force. And I have definitely learned in the time that I've been in this job, that old adage that professionals really do logistics. It is one of the great areas of exclusivity that the United States of America has. We can go do things at the time and place of our choosing because of facilities and teams like those here at DLA in Pennsylvania. These folks are innovating all the time, working with the private sector, companies like Home Depot and Walmart, and utilizing commercial technologies that range from PowerBuy to SAP, and looking at ERP management systems to innovate on the spot. They are founders and entrepreneurs at their core. They are problem solvers at their core. And it's places like this spread all around the Joint Force, enabling us to go do the things that our Commander-in-Chief and you will ask us to do that requires an innovative spirit that is amazing and an exclusive thing that the United States has more than anybody else. What's common about all these things, whether it's tanks or railroads or the capability that DLA does, what's common about all of it is teamwork. Teamwork between the private sector and the public sector. Teamwork between the military and companies that bring military capability. We have done this before, and we've got to do this again. Because the distance between your company's workplace and our folks on the edge of the tactical empire is incredibly small. The distance between you and the Abraham Lincoln, the distance between you and that PAC-3 operator, the distance between you and that F-35 squadron is minuscule. And I would be remiss if I did not talk about service. And you all would be incredibly proud every single day of what your Joint Force is doing all over the world right now. But I'll tell you and I'll ask you and I'll remind you that service in our nation can take many forms. It can be in the military, it can be in the fire department, and it can be in the private sector. One thing that's clear and unambiguous about this country and this state is this fabric of service that runs through our DNA as Americans. Here in Pennsylvania, and General Bregenham talked about it, this is a special, special place. You were keystones of the American Revolution, the Industrial Revolution, the Cold War, and every conflict we've been in ever since then. I'm reminded that Pennsylvania is the birthplace of people like General George Marshall and General Hap Arnold. And I obviously borrow a lot from Marshall in my day job. And I'm grateful for all of the efforts that Pennsylvania and all of you do who've come here for this great event. I'm very grateful for this. And as I conclude today, as I often do, I ask each and every one of us who are in this incredible venue today to remember our soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, Guardians, and Coast Guardsmen, who, as we speak right now, the sun setting in the Middle East, are going out into the darkness to do our nation's work. They go out there so we can be here. They go out there because that's what our country needs them to do, and they go out there to keep us safe. Lastly, I ask all of us to remember our fallen, who gave us the gift of the ultimate sacrifice, and their families who continue to show us what courage, tenacity, and grit really looks like. Thank you all. Thank you to Senator McCormick, his team and leadership who allowed us to be here today. I also want to thank the Pennsylvania State Police for not giving us a ticket, as we did about 120 down the road. For all of you, I hope this conference, this summit, is an incredible 2 days. I know the Secretary and the President are looking forward to spending time with you. Thank you for letting me be here today. God bless you all. God bless America, and God bless our Joint Force.